Welcome back, everybody, and so glad to have you all here. And I can't imagine a better way to have left off from that first presentation than where we left it, which was with the question of what do we make of these the complications that Kavita introduced, and as people who are working practically on the ground to realize visions of openness, how do we do that in a way that's both manageable and intelligent and equitable? And it's genuinely hard, and to do that, I think the suggestion was that we need a diversity of opinions, a diversity of politics, a diversity of perspectives. And that is really what this next panel is all about. So to introduce myself briefly, my name's Michael Wolfe. I am the Scholarly Communications Officer here at the University of California, Davis Library. And I'm pleased to welcome our first panel of the day, which is the Situating Open Access in the Global South. Predicating access to the scholarly literature on the reader's ability to pay, despite our collective technological and financial ability to make that literature freely available to the reader, is, depending on your perspective, either questionable policy or manifest injustice. And while the financial inequalities that limit access to research exist both within and across the entire world, some of our most pernicious inequalities lie between the global north and the global south. And from that perspective, in many ways, open access is for the global south as much as it is for anyone. But that is also, in many ways, the most simple and optimistic picture. And as we all know, and as we heard a little bit from Kavita's presentation, the real world gets substantially more complicated. For starters, open access is not only for the global south, it is of the global south. It's a collection of practices that exist, are established, and have evolved from both within global south countries and in south-south relations. And while we know that, while scholarship is reading, it is also writing and producing. So thinking about how we make scholarship and how open access affects that relationship is of tremendous importance. And we know we can run scholarship in the open. We know we can do it financially and technologically, but the models for doing so are incredibly varied, and they can have unexpected consequences of their own. So to help situate open access in the global south, to run through some of these inconsistencies and difficulties and try to help us figure out how to make this system work, we have an expert panel today. We're fortunate to have folks with substantial expertise from all around the world in the scholarly communications landscape. To begin, we have Solange Santos. We'll be followed by our two remote presenters who you cannot see right now, but they are with us and they can see and hear us. We have Laura Chernowitz from the University of Cape Town, Conrad Oman Hinman, which I know I did that wrong, from Covenant University. Ariana Thackeray remotely from Reykjavik, and Jungfeng Jia from East Stroudsburg University. And because we have a lot to get through, and I won't take up a second more of the speaker's time, and I'll let Solange kick things off.
Morning, everyone. I want to say thanks to the organization for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here. And I will share with you part of the story of Cielo Network and how we are working with open access in Global South, mainly in Latin American countries. So I want to say that the Latin American region is the region that proportionally publishes more in open access. We publish more articles in databases such as Web of Science, Scopus, DOAJ. Proportionally, we publish more than other regions, even in those databases that are not open access. They are commercial databases. This is why Latin American countries see open access as a common good. So for us, it's not a big issue to be open access or to work with open access because we born open access. So Cielo is a program, an international program that born in 1997. We started as a pilot project there, and we searched Latin American countries or Latin American journals in this movement even before the most important declarations of open access. So we start publishing open access model even before the North. So the most important declaration in open access that is Bethesda, Berlin, and Budapest. We start this movement gaining force in 2002, and we born in 1997. But that time, I think that we didn't realize that we born open access, even us. Because we start doing this because we were not in those most important databases, such as PubMed, Web of Science, or others. And our research results was called, Gibbs called this the lost science of the third world. We were producing significant results, in scientific results, but those results, those journals, those articles were not available because that time we were only printed version. So when we start to do this movement in Cielo, this program, we start to put those journals online, and that time the internet, the commercial internet in South America were just starting. So we have the challenge to put those journals online, full text for free, and we start with 10 journals. And we have to convince those editors to put their results, their articles, their journals on the internet for free. It was not easy. So Cielo is a pioneer project on this. And nowadays, it's an international program. We start with this main objective of advancing research in the result that our journal is communicating. And I think that the most important thing to say about Cielo is that we are trying to maximize visibility, availability, use and impact, but most important is the credibility of our journals. Because nowadays, the open access is being related to predatory journals. So, and we are talking that open access is not related to predatory journals. And we have to prove every day that our journals are good journals and we are communicating good scientific results. So the most important thing I think that Cielo is doing for journals in Latin America is because we are being seen as a quality seal. So the credibility of our journals is really important for us, and we have working on improve the quality of those journals and try to complement those bibliographic indices, and also producing bibliometric indicators about our science, our scientific communication. So the network, the Cielo network nowadays is 20 years old program. And we are being present in 12 countries in Latin America, and Portugal, Spain, and South Africa too. We are publishing more than 1,000 of active journals in the region, and 1 million of downloads only in Cielo Brazil collection. Cielo Brazil collection is a kind of a flagship collection in this Cielo network. So if you have to start or to try to do something, we start doing it in Cielo Brazil collection, and then we share this model with other collections in Cielo network. So it's a huge operation. Being present in those countries and because we have some criteria to index journals and we have scientific committees, it's a huge operation inside this network. And it is the most important program, cooperation program, in developed countries. And since 2013, we start working with three main lines of action inside the program, that is professionalization, internationalization, and financial sustainability. We are trying to implement those three main lines in 3 to 5 years in our entire network. We start with Cielo collection, Cielo Brazil collection, and those three main lines are being reflected in our criteria to index journals inside Cielo Brazil collection. When we are talking about professionalization, we are talking about produced journals according to state art. So we are looking for programs and international standard to follow. And when we are talking about internationalization, we are talking about to insert our results, our journals, inside in this global workflow of scientific communication. And financial sustainability is because open access is always financed by someone. And in Brazil, there are some journals that are starting to use APC, for instance, in order to mix the governmental funding, APC, and other institutional funding, for instance, to maintain the journals. And all those three lines are being permeated by innovation and interoperability. Because Cielo has a huge operation, and we are sharing information with other databases, even commercial database. We send them metadata information. We are interoperating with Google Scholar, with Web of Science, with Scopus, the OAJ. For all those PMC, PubMed, with all those databases, we are sharing not only metadata, some of them we are sharing with them, including the full text. So we are interoperating with a lot of other international initiatives in order to expose, to give visibility and accessibility to our contents. In talking specifically about internationalization, Cielo is promoting or is stimulating editors to use more, or to publish more foreign authors in their journals. And how we are doing that? We are studying some specific areas because we have all the information inside Cielo database, so we can check, based on bibliometric indicators, the co-authorship in our articles, and we have some patterns for each area. So we have identified the percentage that authorship, foreign authorship that they have in their articles, and then propose to them to receive or to publish more foreign authors too. So, but it's not, it's based on the pattern that this area is following. And we are proposing, stimulating them to rise those numbers. So we are working with minimum for each area and a recommended percentage of foreign authorship for those journals. In editorial management, we did a survey and we asked them if they are using foreign peer review in their articles to evaluate the manuscripts. And some of them told us that less than 15% of their articles are being evaluated for foreign reviewers. And some areas, we see that it's more common to use foreign peer reviewers. And we are proposing inside Cielo to 22 to achieve some minimal and recommended percentage of manuscript being evaluated by foreign peer reviewers. But all of those actions are based on the pattern that those areas is presenting inside Cielo database, where are numbers that we can check. And in Cielo collection, Cielo Brazil collection, we have in those years, in 10 years, we have achieved, I can see, 62% in our collection is in English, are being published in English of our articles. Let's put my glass. In our articles. And 18% of our collections, all the articles in our collections are being published in both Portuguese and English. And we expected, or we would like to achieve 75% publishing in English, articles in English inside the whole collection, 50% in Portuguese, and 25% Portuguese and English, because some areas, they publish both. The same article is published in Portuguese and in English, depending on the area, for sure. And there are some areas that they are only published in English, and others that's only published in Portuguese. It depends on the area, social science, biological science, or health science, public health. Public health, they usually publish in both Portuguese and English. Social science and political science, usually in Portuguese, Spanish, or other language. Biological and other, they are publishing more in English than other areas. Talking about internationalization, when we talk about insert our journals in the global workflow, we are talking about indexing. For instance, all journals, all contents in Cielo Brazil are in Google Scholar. And Cielo Citation Index, as you probably know, Cielo Citation Index is a subset of journals, of Cielo journals inside the Web of Science database, but it's not being selling. It's, when you have access to Web of Science, you have access also to Cielo Citation Index. The OAJ in Crossref, 100%, 70% indexed in both Scopus or Web of Science and Cielo. And services, all articles are being presented by ReadCube, and they have Ultrametrics, and those data are being deposited in Figshare. 40% of those journals are using Scholar1, 42% OJS, and 30% are using other systems to follow the revision of the review of manuscripts. In Cielo Brazil, all of journals are adopting XML JETs. That's the international pattern to publish. 80% are Creative Commons CC BY, which means that you can use in every way you want the content published in Cielo Brazil collection. We expect to achieve over to 95% in 2018. We are associating with other institutions, COASP, the OAJ counter. Counter is the methodology to count downloads, and you have to take out the access by robots, APLSP. And the dimensions that we are talking about is manuscript evaluation, authorship, language of publication. We expect to achieve a percentage of articles in the internationalization based on those dimensions according to those areas. Okay? Just to share with you, in 1998, Cielo was responsible for all the entire workflow of publishing journals. And 2013, we start to involve editors in this process to publish journals. So nowadays, they are responsible for send to Cielo articles in XML format. And based on this, we are trying to put costs low. Based on HTML, we can produce PDF, EPUB, HTML, and other formats. And online manuscript services, we are adopting continuous publication. That means that we are publishing article by article. It's not necessary to wait until a number is closed to be published, and broaden interoperability, as I told you before. And for 2017-18, we are planning to have a preprint repository for articles, a platform to authors, where they can find services to publish articles in XML and to have other services associated to that. And the research data, we are talking about open sciencing and open data repositories for Cielo collection. Okay? That's my last slide. As I told you, Cielo is recognized as a quality seal for agents, authors, and students. We are looking for high impact, not based on only citations, but web presence and downloads. Priority lines, we will follow those priority lines for 3 to 5 years, we are trying to achieve those objectives, aligning with policies, research policies, and disciplining idiosyncrasies, because we are not the minimum and the expected numbers that they have to achieve are related to the characteristics of those areas. Follow up the performance, because we have all the bibliometric indicators about journals, articles, authors, and so on. We can balance domestic and international influence of our journals, partnership with other institutions to publish it according to state art, and leading introduction and adoption innovations, overcome resistance, because always sometimes you have to face some resistance because academia is kind of conservative about some aspects of publishing. Optimize allocation and minimize operational cost. When we're talking about using platform and scale, we can, as a network, gain scale, and we hope to put the costs low. Share and expand the experience with Cielo Brazil, with all the Cielo network. That's, I've tried 15 minutes.
That was, you're perfectly on time. Okay, so we're gonna, thank you so much, Solange. We're gonna switch to one of our online presenters. So if we can queue up Laura. Hello. We can't hear you yet. You're muted on your end.
Right, I'm not muted anymore.
No, you're coming in.
Okay, excellent.
Well, welcome and go ahead.
Great, well, it's wonderful to be here. I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be there in person, but it's fabulous that you've made a plan, and I'm really enjoying this opportunity, so thank you. I do have some slides that I'm going to share with you, and I have been given very clear instructions about time. And I'm assuming you can see everything clearly. I'm going to be making some general comments about knowledge inequality from the margin, very much in keeping with the theme of the conference. So we know that knowledge production and dissemination have always been fraught, they've always been contested, and in fact, they've always been unequal. From a north-south perspective, we know also that there's always been great unbalance, and this is a wonderful image of Kofi Annan handing over his job at the UN to Ban Ki-moon. One of the most powerful images, I think, is when you look at the representation of the world scaled by the number of documents in the Web of Science by the authors living there. This is a 2011 image, which I'm sure hasn't changed that much in the last few years. It makes the point very loud and clear, and Africa's looks a little bit like a limp balloon. I'm sad to say that Europe is completely disproportionate, as is North America. The situation is also dramatically stark when you look at scientific citations. So we basically have global North citing one another. And the most cited authors living in the US and in European cities, in fact, very urban in perspective. So the subject of this conference is the Global South, which is partly geographical. And so here I am in Cape Town, in South Africa, 9 hours away, many, many kilometers and miles away. But it's not just a geographical difference, it's also an imaginary. This is the most brunt line is the most common representation of the global south, Australia in the global north. But really, I think it's more useful to imagine something which is not a simple dichotomy, rather based around structures of centrality and marginality, where the main axis is the metropole periphery north-south relationship. And of course, it's really important to remember that inequalities exist both across and within places. So when we're talking about the global south, we also need to be thinking about marginalization within northern spheres. This image is an image of Cape Town, where I live, and it shows a very comfortable middle class green suburb directly next door to what is largely a shack settlement, with all the implications that go with that in terms of access to resources, digital resources, and all other resources. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what shapes inequalities in knowledge production. Obviously, and the most immediate issue that comes to mind is funding. And I think the map is the easiest way to make the point that research and development intensity is dramatically unequal between the global north and the global south. But it's not just about the money. What it really is about is what counts. What counts in reward systems, what counts in terms of legitimacy, and how gatekeeping happens. The first point, to go back to that map, is that the world is scaled by the number of documents in the web of science. And the web of science privileges the journal article. But we know from research that we've done, and that's been done in other places, that much of the global south doesn't publish in journal articles. It publishes in a whole range of other genres. And in Africa, for example, consultancy reports are often the way that research gets funded and gets shared. And then, of course, there are a whole range of other possibilities, ranging from including monographs, a lot of technical reports, book chapters, and so on. So the fact that the journal article is privileged is a disadvantage for the global south. In terms of reward systems, the journal article is also privileged in the way that academics are rewarded, and it's a financial reward. So in South Africa, the National Department of Education gives universities about $13,000 for every journal article published in key indexes. And that is correct, 13,000 per article. And most South African universities, 26 universities, most of them, I think 2 don't, give a percentage of that money directly to the authors, to the academics. And obviously that skews publishing behavior quite dramatically. It's also about what type of research is privileged. And we know that there are different types of research, different genres, different audiences. And if you look at a typology of research types, it's discovery research, the traditional type of research that gets privileged very largely in journal articles. But in fact, the type of research that gets done in Africa, as we've seen through research we've done in 4 African countries, tends to be interpretive or applied research. And then the important point to make is the valorization of citation counts in academia, where citations are used for promotion and for measures of reputation. And we know that citations have their own uneven geographies, with those from the global north citing those from the global north and keeping that network closed. And alt metrics have been very, very slow to be accepted in the global south. Also important is the fact that research isn't generally accessible to those in the South. So works that are more easily, projects undertaken by the South African, 54% of respondents said that the research, their ready accessibility is hampered. And we all are suffering from budget cuts in library subscriptions. There's also the question of culture and academic culture and if you look at research output by GDP, if you look at Africa, you would be surprised. You might expect South Africa to have the best GDP per country, but in fact, Zimbabwe, a very poor country suffering from great economic problems, is one of the top 3 in Africa. So the culture of research is really important. Then one has to consider who publishes and what gets published about. If you look at the articles published in international peer-reviewed journals, according to research done in 2008, USA academics is about a third. Developing country academics is about 20%, of which half come from the BRICS countries, from China, India, Brazil, and from Turkey and Mexico. And sub-Saharan Africa is only 1% of the total. Yet we have this ironic situation that northern authors publish about the South. There was an absolutely extraordinary article which was published last year, which was a study of 2 top African studies journals looking at the publications between 1993 and 2013, and they found that the percentage of articles published by Africa-based authors has declined, not due to lower submission rates from Africa, but because of low and declining acceptance rates, and furthermore that Africa-based scholars are systematically cited less than others. One also has to consider the editorial boards of journals and where they come from. Here's one example. We've seen there are studies that show similar patterns elsewhere. The total number of board members come from high HDI countries. And one of these journals, one of the medical journals, said, we editors seek a global status for our journals, but we shut out the experiences and practices of those living in poverty by our unconscious neglect. One group is advantaged while the other is marginalized. What this all points to, that in fact, when the word international is being used, it actually refers to the global north. And this really, really matters. It matters because local knowledge needs to be available to others in similar conditions. And local knowledge is a necessary and often missing contribution to global knowledge. It matters because the plurality of knowledge is good for science, and a knowledge production and dissemination system that sidelines 3/4 of the world is bad for everyone. In a digital age, all of this is exacerbated by the new currency, which is discoverability. Because if it's not online, it doesn't exist. And if it can't be found, it doesn't exist. So visibility becomes a requirement for participation. Which brings me to the last couple of comments I want to make in this very short input, and I'm hoping there'll be some opportunity for discussion, which is around the opportunities of open access. We know that open access policies are growing, and they're particularly widespread in the global north, as this map shows. But there is a serious worry and a major unintended consequence that these open access policies, which exist in the global north but don't exist in the global south, mean that there's a danger of increasingly drowning out scholarship from the global south. And I'd like to reiterate that visibility and invisibility in material space is increasingly defined by prominence, ranking, and presence on the internet. So what's found online shapes what comes to be known. And so it becomes about knowledge itself, how knowledge is shared. And to emphasize that participation, not just access, but participation from the South is essential for global knowledge for all. Thank you. That's my part of the formal input, and I'm hoping that there'll be some opportunity for some discussion.
Thank you. And Conrad, yeah, you're up next. Thank you very much, Laura.
I will stay in the morning, and I say good morning. It's actually quite nice to follow up with the last speaker, and I thought seriously about this, and I had a discussion lately, and an issue came up, and he ended up with this saying that, apologies to the females around, and when the third word to anything to the female part is called female genital mutilation. But when the knot does anything, it's called vaginal rejuvenation. Yet, by the end of the day, I hope he paints a picture. It's all about mutilating anyway. Now that brings me to what we're looking at. So as we continue, let's again reestablish what we seek to do with open access. We wish to, I don't know whether you agree with this, but I do, we wish to generate a legal, coordinated, discoverable, sustainable way to attain the broadest possible circulation of scholarly knowledge for greater good of the society. So therefore, we must create scholarly society managed, researcher governed, non-profit, interdisciplinary platform for facilitating communication among researchers and between researchers and the world. I suppose that's what we're trying to do with the open access movement or thing. That's by Catherine Fitzpatrick. Now, we'll talk about several models, a whole lot. And, but I think one of the key things pushing the present discussion is the overt reliance on article publishing charges, which I think and I believe is a problem of the North. If we consider the first speaker, we will come to see that what we now call open access started way back. But I think, again, the problem with the South is that of inability to define itself, define its processes, and look out for what works for it. And so even though somehow the now championed open access started in Latin America, they never gave it a name. They just walk around something. And so someday somebody gets up in the North, and then we have declarations, and then we have open access. So I will bring this up later and see how that works. So in my university, I started with the open access movement sometime in 2010. Went for my first conference in Ghana, organized by BMC, Biomed Central 2011. And when I came back, I spoke with my school management and what we could do about it. And so we formulated a policy after the Berlin 2012 there were a whole lot of activity in South Africa. I think it was just an open access time in South Africa. Had as much as 10 days, one conference onto another. And then formulated one, it became operational in 2014, and we've been trying to get a whole lot since. Now, just to highlight some of the things that has happened with my institution, trying to mirror what we have. That's just what we had over time. There was a time where, like you have in South Africa, the institution tried to encourage people to publish by giving monetary reward. So if you publish, you're giving some money in dollars. And then it created some other arguments, both in the money given and why it should be given. And then there was a time of a non-open access period. And then, of course, from the end of 2013 till now, we had an open access policy, institutional funds to pay for article publishing charges. And so, of course, you could see the increase. This is from Scopus, actually. Now, so my institution, when you compare that with other universities in my country, on the Scopus platform, not anywhere else, you will see how well we seem to be doing, even though we're barely 15 years. And of course, articles form a major part of what we have on Scopus. Books and others are quite wanting. Then on Skyver, we could actually see how the demography of knowledge is, how well we are publishing and what that means. And so looking at Skyver competence for the university, we have about 4 areas or so where it seems by university is gaining global relevance or competence, let me use that term. And so having an open access policy has increased publication count, increased visibility of the institution and researchers, improved collaboration on national and regional platforms, industry recognition. I'm actually presently working on an MOU with some industry players before I came, increased the publication by as much. Our closest contemporary, I don't want to call them competitors, it's quite far from us. And of course, shown clarity in the area of publication, reference, and innovation. Increased funding for publication by as much as 150% since 2013. Well, if you consider that, if you take the first university in my country, University of Ibadan, and you compare them with Covenant University, the total researcher faculty strength of Covenant University is just 22% of what University of Ibadan has. And so there's a whole lot of reward, if we want to use that term. There's a whole lot of reward. And that brings me to the issue we really have at hand. So I've shown a scorecard for my university, and then you could see from that, okay, well, there's a whole lot of things you could do out of that. But it comes as a cost. How much have we invested? 2013, I suppose, 3 papers on that. And how much it costs the school to invest in so much of the infrastructure required to power this, because you just can't get there thinking about it. So we may ask, can openness work in the global south? My answer is what? Yes. How? We just can't say, as I said, we just can't with a single stroke. Now, let's look at global south. The last speaker mirrored a lot of that. Challenges are enormous. You have government and funders, organizations that are not collaborating or working very well. They all tend to be on their own. You have publishers getting only the best out and leaving the whole lump out there. Infrastructure may not be as available. Somebody said to me that the number of cell phone users are now very high in Africa. But I asked, what about repositories and the rest? And then, of course, universities and libraries, how are they working? How coordinated are they? If I take my country again, I don't think they have such a coordination with it. And then, of course, we have the issue of the APC style, open access, drives only gold, open access. And even though we were driving, coming from Berlin, recently, it was all about flipping and flipping and flipping. But the question really is, you get to flip in the north, and there's nothing to flip in the south. You have to have something first before you flip. The argument is that there's already money in the system. Is that true? Okay. And then, of course, you have, lastly, the researcher himself. He has a whole lot of challenges. I think I want to highlight something. 1998, I sent a paper to a journal in Germany, Federsreporter, and they wrote me back that the whole thing amounted to wishful thinking. They didn't believe such research could exist in Africa. And I think that paints a picture. And Ralph Shimon and the Max Planck people still have that whole mentality. I think I actually had to speak up over there, and when it's as if the South is a tertiary issue. When we were done with the North, then we begin to look at what we do with the South at some point. And that really begs a whole lot of challenges. Now, as the last speaker spoke about, aside South Africa and then maybe Egypt or one or two other countries, I really doubt if we have a well-organized system. I was speaking with Glenn. He's chair of the South Africa Consortium. They've come to that point of trying to form a consortium at the national level to organize a number of things. We don't have that. And let me pinpoint a number of, just one of them. Let's take funding. My country, we have TET Fund, was enacted in 2011, and imposes a 2% education tax on registered companies in Nigeria. Okay? And amongst others, it's supposed to disburse funds to federal, states, tertiary educational institutions, do a whole lot, and of course, research and publication. But it currently supports only 78 universities out of 153. And 40 are federal, 44 state-owned, 69 privately owned. And where you have privately owned universities begin to drive research and education in the country, and the same country sees to say, the money we have is going to be for only a few. Now, the argument is that the private universities are owned by private persons, but the counter-argument is that the research, publication, and the input of those researchers in the private institutions are not sold somewhere in another country. They contribute immensely to the development of that country. So why exclude them from such fund? And so, well, And of course, for the year, they have a 1.8 billion naira, which is about $6 million US budget. Well, you can compare that to yours, even as university. And that's for a country, and then that's, imagine what you have for your university. So this paint the kind of picture you have across the South, and where a whole lot of money is devoted on security vote, which the governor or president can spend without accounting for it. And research is an inconvenience you just have to do something to it. So, for me, what's the way out? Because we need to start thinking of solutions and thinking how we do. Accessibility, but we must not forget that research is primarily about communication. We must have, as she just said, we must have interpretable journals, repository. We must create a contributory system. Institutional libraries must get to work together. Then there is the issue of language. I think one of the reasons why all the effort from Latin America didn't get so much attention is because written in Portuguese. So if it's not English, then we don't need it. It doesn't exist. There's a whole lot of work in China, but until you Anglonize it, it's not known. You just remain there. You go to India, there's a whole lot. So, and then visibility. Visibility, Africans must do something about their visibility. There's a whole lot of knowledge there, but if it's not visible, then it's not counted as existing. So we need to index, and index. Then we should have decolonization of knowledge, inequality issues, social justice. Well, some persons have argued that globalization is becoming the new colonization. I suppose it's arguable. But now we have a new nationalization. You can tell me about it better. We have it in the US. It's just popped up in Britain. The French barely escaped. We don't know what will come up in Germany. So there's a new nationalization coming up. Would that be the new face of globalization? And we really need to do serious thing about that. And then we need to look at the practices. The practices that, what would drive open access in the South are practices that are acceptable and adoptable in the South. The continued importation of Northern ideas and ways, as I said in my beginning, when it's done in the South, it has a bad name. When it's done in the North, it's given a glorified name. So even though open access started in the South, but I mean, it has that picture of a Northern thing now. Then we must have discussions at local level. I, for one, have chosen to enter into that. 2011, 2012, there was an opera. There was a whole lot of talk. And then, I mean in Nigeria, and then it just died out. And so then we should also review the reward system. Well, you know that publishing is the publish or perish thing. Publishing has a way of, the reward system will drive what goes on. Now, in my university, why do you have so much publication going up now? The paying, and then now there's, aside the issue of paying, the university authority says you must publish in journals that are only, since Web of Science and Scopus seem to have come together, in Scopus. So I try to use Scopus to just drive a few of them. And so even though it's not in law, they try to drive that direction. But before then, it was impact factor. So when you put impact factor and add promotion and tenure to it, then you have a skewedness to one end. And then, of course, you go back to romanticism that was spoken about earlier. All right? And so we put values only on articles. I mean, I thought I was going to come to that. If you check, you saw a whole lot of articles. But that's not the only thing we we produce. But I mean, it's a thing that investors hitting at. Okay, articles and articles and articles, and then you have a lot of things like that. So, which model is good? We can't choose one. It's not different across the terrain. APCs are financially suited for the north, but it's not necessarily true for the south. Flipping may not benefit everyone. You just have something before you flip it. Awareness and consensus meetings at different levels should continue. Hubs and consortiums should be. Now, OA may have started in the Latin America. It was publicly funded, so there has to be funding at some point. We know that. We can't shy away from that. So what do? We will require pilots. I see my university example as a pilot, and it's working. We will require experiments. We will require trials. We will require to discuss across different shades of arguments and across different levels. And hopefully, we'll come up with something. As we go on, each sector will get something that works for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. And we're going to switch back to our remote presenters. And next we have Ariana Thackeray. Hello. Can you hear and see us?
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hello. We hear you. You can go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today to participate in this event. I really believe it is very important to have these kind of discussions where we can learn about different strategies and models of open access to different regions to achieve better future for science communication. So congratulations to the organizers. Let me share a couple of slides here. Okay. Let's go. So one key feature it is worth looking at from Latin America is that most of the publishing is scholarly-led, scholarly armed, scholarly financed, something that we don't see at all in a North American or European context. Each institution in Latin America is part of an informal cooperative that has not ever been made explicit. But every institution just finances journals with its own faculty members, and then that content is made available through open access to other institutions, which means that everybody gets benefit from everybody else's investment. This kind of informal cooperative has really worked even before open access got its name. However, research evaluation systems in a region assign different values depending on where a researcher decides to publish, as the other panelists were saying, north or south, and which papers selects to cite. So it is highly rated to publish in or cite journals of the global north, that we can call internationally, but they are from the global north. On the contrary, is low rated to publish in or cite journals of the global south. That is happening in Latin America. So even though we implement two different open access environments with different valuation scales, the decisions made in the north totally impact the way we do science in the south. That is very important to be aware of that. I don't know if you saw this news. This is today's news, The Guardian. What a beautiful coincidence. And it says it's time for academics to take back control of research journals. So that is the Europe context. Well, in Latin America, we could say it's time that academia doesn't allow to lose control of its key product, knowledge, because we, academia, still have control of its journals. So I would say it's time for the opportunity to make science an actual global conversation which privileges the development of humanity. Okay, let's look at some key features of the open access in Latin America. What I believe needs to be known in order to develop an inclusive open publishing ecosystem. Latin America is not in transition to open access. Latin America, as Solange said before, has been always open access. Open access has been the natural way in which our scientific communication system works. Journals have been supported by universities and research institutions. The majority of them, about 80% of the total number, including the most prestigious journals, are published by public universities, I mean government funded. The tradition of scholarly publishing has not been ever outsourced to commercial publishers, nor supported by charging authors ever. Historically, we have suffered from not having access to science in the global north. And more recently, we are suffering the restriction of publication in the journals of the north because of the APC model. So in Latin America, we have an open access environment. This cooperative ecosystem involves cooperation, networking, crowdsourcing, open source software, in-house software, free software, international collaboration as some key factors of this open access environment. The tradition of scholarly publishing, as I said before, is not in the side of commercial publishing. It is a non-profit, mainly public-funded scientific communication system whose basement is composed by journals, and above them, covering some other services, we found institutional portals and repositories, and on the top of them, we have regional initiatives like Redalic, Cielo, La Referencia, Latindex, and some others. So these regional initiatives, Latindex, Redalic, Cielo, Claxo, are empowering Gold Open Access with different added value services to journals as a complement of services to journals. There's also key stakeholders in green open access, like La Referencia, which is the network of national networks of institutional repositories. And there are also repositories, disciplinary repositories, and there are also mandates, institutional and national mandates. That is the case, for example, of Peru, Argentina, and recently, 2 years ago, the mandate of Mexico. Well, however, we've got, of course, weaknesses. For example, open access policies are recommendations more than mandates. Evaluation rewards publishing in English, publishing in the North, in international journals, losing sometimes relevant regional topics that are in the agenda of other countries. For example, there are many examples in here. For example, Chagas disease or Ebola, that, by the way, lives could be saved if they were open. Open access indicators are not yet used for research evaluation, and this is urgent. Research policies and funding agencies are being influenced by international commercial publishers, particularly the APC business model. And another weakness is that there's no regional open access formal coalition among these key stakeholders. So now let's take a look quickly at Redalic's model and how it's contributing to the scientific journals directly and more widely or broadly to open access in the region. Redalic.org, we can see Redalic.org as a platform of non-commercial, cooperative, and sustainable open access in the region. Let's see this platform as a layered infrastructure where in each layer a journal can find different services and products that complement its own capabilities. In the basement, the structure is based on peer-reviewed journals along with publishing institutions, and their platforms mainly build on software like OJS. In Redalic, we perform a selection process based on quality criteria to guarantee our journal collection follows a peer review process and other requirements of quality, of course. Then this evaluation passes to a committee, an international advisory board, which is composed by experts experts of different fields and different countries. Now let's move on onto the edition layer. Redalic developed an XML markup system that we call MarkAlic, based on the journal article tag suite, which allows journal editors to get its articles in XML format. This tool, well, free access to this tool is provided for open access non-APC scholarly journals indexed by Redalic. And this is a tool that is free to use, it is designed to prevent editors from outsourcing XML markup. It doesn't require technical expertise. It minimizes XML markup time, and it generates enriched multimedia formats, allow content reuse and digital presentation. So we provide this service as a free service for journals, the journals that we index. MarkAlic, this markup tool, together with the XML file format, generates a media-enriched article reader, a PDF version of the article, an EPUB version, and HTML format. All these are available in Redalic to access to the content, and there's also the possibility for journal editors to download them and take them to their own websites. Redalic provides not only journals homepages, but also homepages for countries, authors, institutions, and areas of knowledge, with their journals collections, search engines, advanced filters, different data visualizations, and metrics. This is what we call the service layer in Redalic. Now, talking about visibility, I could say, in fact, Redalic began 13 years ago with the main goal of improving the visibility of the scientific journals of the region. We work with search engines, libraries, directories, and social media to disseminate broadly the scientific content and to improve its discoverability, as well as with repositories and aggregators through interoperability protocols like the Open Archives Initiative Protocol for metadata harvesting, or with initiatives like ORCID in the case of our author web pages that allows researchers to integrate their works published in Redalic to an ORCID profile. And finally, we provide an alternative set of metrics who are intended to answer different questions than impact factor. For example, institutional strengths, the most influential journals in a knowledge area, who is using the knowledge generated by an institution, analysis in terms of collaboration, among others. So today we hold a collection of more than 500,000 full text articles from 1,200 journals published by more than 500 publishers, institutions from 22 countries with more than 1 million authors. We are registering more than 8 million downloads per month. And just to illustrate how much that's really contributes to journals, just in the issue phase, we can see that Redalic with MarkAlic contributes, I should say, subsidizes the generation of electronic version of journals. If we look at the market prices of what MarkAlic does for free, and considering that currently Redalic holds 42,000 journal issues, you can see the calculated contribution when the whole collection will be processed. This is just an example of the services that Redalic is offering to journals, and in this case, in a collaborative way, because journal editors mark its articles in XML in our platform. Now let's look at a couple of successful cases. The first one is that journals generated XML content with no cost in MarkAlic, download the PDF, HTML, intelligent multimedia article reader, EPUB article versions, and use them in their own websites. We have several examples of journals using files generated by Redalic in its own websites. This is another successful case the case of APC to non-APC conversion, the case of this Argentinian journal that eliminated its APC policy to apply for a user account in Markalik. And talking about APC quickly, about 92% of the total journals indexed by Redalyc are non-APC journals. The remaining 8% are journals published by professional associations that are not non-public funded, or journals that recently started to charge authors. APC represents a complement for its survival only, non-profit, and they charge really low cost for authors. So there's a risk in Latin America. We are in risk of the propagation of the open access model of the North. And I should highlight that in a government-funded scientific communication system where non-APC publication is a fact and sustainability is driven by public resources, which are the advantages in adopting a model to charge out of this? I totally believe that it's a risk of discouragement of governments and public institutions to keep supporting scientific research and publication. And it is also a risk of discouragement of non-profit open access platforms like Redalyc to keep strengthening publications in an open access way. And there's also a doubt about if journals could become self-sufficient through APCs in a region with no funds in research projects to publish results. So, well, that brings us to the end of my presentation. Now, I'd like to summarize by saying that how could Latin America and other developing regions participate in a global scientific conversation when restrictions change from reading to publishing? The APC model brings the risk of widening the gap between Latin American research and international publications. So APCs are a problem in the South also because of the interaction North and South. Okay, so the APC model also brings a risk of breaking the open nature of scientific communication system in Latin America because of this propagation effect in our region. From the Redalyc's perspective, there's a great opportunity to learn best practices from each side of the world to achieve set design of common good. So, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ariana. And we're going to have our last presentation with Jing Feng. And then we'll open it up to questions. And I know we started a little bit late, so we're going to run a little bit past the allotted time so that we can be sure to have discussion.
Thank you. As a last speaker, of course, I have the pressure. The pressure comes from Mike and probably from some of you. It's 12:20 and it's lunchtime. Frankly, I'm hungry. So I want to, I will make this presentation as brief as possible. The topic of my presentation is open access in China. So I'm going to focus my discussion on this particular region in China. I have conducted many researches in open access, but open access in China is not my specialty. While preparing for my book, I spent some time reading articles, data, books, and I have some findings, I have some observations, some concerns that I want to share with you today. Very briefly, the Berlin Declaration on Open Access to Science and Knowledge, that is one of the milestones in open access. And obviously, some Chinese academic entities joined this very early. This indicates the eagerness of the Chinese in open access. Along with their joining Berlin Declaration, the Chinese has already developed some projects in open access. Those are something, I'm not going to read those to you. and they have developed some events, some international and national events to promote open access. And they have already made some achievements. The achievements may be reflected in some areas, including open access policies made by some Chinese entities, and institutional repositories containing open access articles, documents. Some of them are pretty large, if you look at the numbers here, and the efforts are pretty remarkable. Also, the open access journals, open access projects that they already have. And of course, if you look at some of the websites created by Chinese government, you'll find that they have provided a lot of data freely available to people. Here today, I want to concentrate on the issues rather than the achievements. The achievements, you can easily Google them to find them, but the issues probably mentioned somewhere, but I want to concentrate here today. Those are something that are from my observations. The issues that I believe that we have to face when we consider open access in China. If you look at some of those websites, you may be able to find something like those. Although you will have some huge institutional repositories, but when we try to open document there, many of them not available for full text. And the initiatives are created by only several major entities rather than the nationwide. So those are something among the issues that we need to consider. Okay, I like to spend a little bit more time on discussing why we see those issues. And I believe those are something that have already influenced the way that the Chinese went on the effort of open access. The first one, I want to focus on the memorization way of learning. In the past, when we talk about education, talk about some practices in China, we talk about this part of learning style. And we try to contrast this one with creativity. But that's only one dimension when we talk about this. When we explore the problems or some challenges in open access, and this becomes one of the issues that we have to discuss. The memorization style of learning. That way, you have students to memorize patterns, to memorize numbers, facts, in order to prepare for tests. This is pretty much popular in China. So how is this related to open access? And that probably is pretty much something that I want to touch with the second point. They are interrelated. In traditional China, we have people, scholars, who try to memorize famous texts and use those famous texts in their own text as kind of a way to express their intelligence. And this has been practiced for a long time and have been very popular in China. But this is really something that is kind of a conflict with the open access effort. When people has built this kind of behavior, this kind of way of doing something, then suddenly they open to open access. Suddenly they have idea that the literature is available openly, and you have to make your own material available to people. Therefore, there has been concern that if I make it my document, my research, open access, so how about people copying my material? So, and because of this tradition, there's a overspread concern of sharing your research before or even after you publish your research. And this has become the obstacle in the Chinese effort in open access. So the consequences are pretty obvious. I don't know how many of you have already read some news about some Chinese people plagiarizing, research, having some kind of unethical conduct. And those are something that we believe not belong to open access. And part of the thing that we consider as an obstacle for open access in China. Of course, solutions with the policies, that's number one. And the policies as achievements that I introduced before are only implemented by a few academic agencies, not all of them, not overspread. So we're advocating a nationwide or a wide implementation of policies. That's one thing. And of course, financial, and I believe other presenters have already talked about the financial support for open access. I think I only have, that's it.
Well, there's quite a lot to discuss, and I'm going to invite questions from the audience if once the microphone goes around. And in the meantime, I will exercise my moderator's prerogative and kick things off. I'm curious, something that underlies all discussions of open access and was touched on explicitly in some of the presentations and implicitly in others, is the idea that there exists a problem of access to the literature, that the current accessibility of scholarship today, whether in the North or South, poses a serious problem to the advancement of knowledge. And I was wondering if the panel could comment on to what extent there is a problem. We talked about piracy earlier. Is piracy part of the access to literature landscape? And can we take it seriously as a solution? Is that, we can go from there about what some of the implications are, but I'd be curious to hear the basic feeling on the ground of how accessibility is today.
Well, in our case, I think, for instance, in Cielo, when we talk about availability, is related to that sensation that the research that we are producing in our countries are not being seen. So to put it available sometimes means to be indexed by those bigger bibliographic index, such as Web of Science or Scopus. And sometimes the sensation that if you are not there, you are not being, your research results are not visible, And those databases are commercial database, and you have to pay to have access to that database. And some universities, some countries, they can't pay to have access to those databases. And then we are putting our results, our contents available for free. For sometimes our journals are indexed there, and sometimes not. And there are countries, if you, for instance, Bolivia, if those journals were not in Cielo, maybe it's not maybe, those journals are not being indexed by Web of Science or Scopus. That science is not visible because there are some countries that still have their journals in the printed version, and we are putting those results online on internet for free, an open access model inside a network that interoperates with a lot of systems. So these those results are visible now. So it's related to visibility and to access, to having access to that content.
I want to add that talking about accessibility, when we consider open access, institutional repository, for example, not only the number of total deposits, that is something that we need to consider, to make as achievement, but also the full text availability is something, because we want to have free access to everything, okay, the data, the results, the full text. That is something I think probably in some places we need to.
Yes.
Oh, well, I think that beyond accessibility, we're talking about availability. Really, which comes in different contexts. You may be able to access it, but like I said, if something written in Portuguese and I'm an English speaker, what do I do with such a document?
Mm-hmm.
That creates, for me, a barrier, even though the paywall may not be there. Okay, so you have that. And then, again, we're talking about the issue of the information may be there, they may be in printed form, but they're not online yet. And so you can access it. And so when it becomes, the yardstick for measurement is if you only say to be accessible or visible when you're online, then you have a challenge on your hand. Now, for piracy and plagiarism, I believe that is a human thing. As long as you have communication between more than two persons, you're going to have the issue of plagiarism and piracy for several reasons, whatever it is. But there shouldn't be a primary issue. Rather, we should somehow find how we use such things to create what we want to do. Because when you have a paywall and somebody tells me I can get that material somewhere, you really think somebody's going to wait to pay through the paywall if I guess that? Maybe not. Maybe it will. Then you have that of citation, which is one that drives accessibility, I think. Now, how many researchers in the North submit, let's say, a thesis, and then you ask how many researchers in the South did you cite? But you have a scenario where if someone in the South writes a thesis, he or she is queried on, did you cite up to 80% of researchers in the North? If he says no, then you're not good enough. You can move on. So you have another war created by this, I don't like using the word colonialism, but I mean it's something of sorts where even the materials I have, I don't feel comfortable using them. Now, my daughter said to me once, watching Discovery TV, Daddy, I said, yes, how come black people are not featured for discoveries on TV? How come it's white people that come to our place to come and discover things for us? Shouldn't we know the places better than those people that are coming? I said, yes. And I laughed. We had some other argument after then. But that's really the idea. So even though we're still having we're driving this open access thing, the old system is still there. The old picture of what is not is better than what is in the South. So even when you want to access it, even when they're online, where do you get them from? If you go to Web of Science, how much of the Southern materials are there? So you get a Northern scientist writing on the South. And you say, he's good because of his location. But if a Southern scientist writes on the topic, you say, it is not under our scope. So there's a whole lot of barriers which is my concern for the open access thing. We don't take what was there already and bring it on the open access platform, and then we create whole level of restrictions and barriers. Thank you.
Mario, or do we have or Jonathan, sorry.
I beat him to it. So I'm just wondering if the panelists can comment at all on variation within your country or region across different fields. So there's been a lot of focus on biology and life sciences, and if you have any perspective on differences within the sciences, say chemistry and physics versus biology, or across to the humanities, and whether or not there are sort of different cultures even within your regions for those different fields.
Let me start on. Yes, there are differences across disciplines within country or across countries. Talking about the open access, yes, each discipline may have a total different culture, just like regular publishing, regular research, and exactly the same as in open access. In biology, for example, the open access tradition may be a little bit different from philosophy in China, for example. In previous research, people try to concentrate on sciences as in general to look for the difference between social sciences, for example, medical science. In practice, the culture in research and publishing really have some influence on the development of open access in those disciplines. So,
the sciences and the humanities, from my end, they're quite distinct in the cultural perceptions. For example, you will find more open access publications with the sciences, and even more with the biological and biomedical areas. Apparently, they seem to be more open, let me use that term, than the humanities. Those in humanities have a culture of holding back. I think I had a discuss with a humanities professor once, and his idea, which portrays what they have in the cycle, is that it starts with the issue of being online. If it's online, then it's not good enough. And then after that battle was won, then it went, if it's open access, then it's even worse. And then, of course, let me give you a scenario. We had promotion exercise in my school at that point, and why those in the sciences didn't bother what I was. You have all young people in the biological sciences, biomedical, they just go out there. There's so much they're turning out, there's so much and they just go about their cases, But those in humanities comes up with, what is this man's name with the predatory journal thing? And then they list out all the predatory journals in the world. And what it meant that nobody was going to get a promotion on their end, because now everybody's a predatory writer. And so you're stuck in that. Well, for them, they always argue that they say, for those of you in sciences, you have so much to write about. You don't really bother about context and concept, and so you just do it. You're not concerned about context, concept, blah, a whole lot of. And so they got to do a whole lot of that concept thing, context thing. When are you writing? Are you writing? Then if you have to hold it in hard copy, that's when it's good, and things like that. And so I think that for those in sciences, they are much more open to using the internet, making free, sharing things around, because actually really beneficial for you as a scientist to be on something now and somebody else says something, maybe in the US, in Canada, in China, or somewhere. But somehow I believe that the conception they have among the humanities is becoming a stumbling block for them. And that culture, I mean, even outside Nigeria, I think is the same. You have that, which we need to deal with that. And if we begin to deal with it, they become more open, then probably it will help in that sector. But I don't think it should stop openness anyway. I don't think so.
Yes. Sorry, just complementing the arguments, is that about open access, there is no difference there. All of them are not worried about open access, but between the disciplines, among the disciplines, they have what I feel as there are some resistance about specific procedures or innovations. And in biological sciences and medical science, they are more open to innovation. They adopt it first. And when we start talking about some innovations with editors in humanity and social science, they used to be more resistant. But talking about the reward system inside Brazil, for instance, in Brazil, they are worried about which publication, which article, which journal I should choose to publish my article, depending on my area, how my area is looking that publication in Web of Science and in Scopus, how they will have a different punctuation based on the system that on the journal and sometimes the impact factor of the journals that they are publishing.
Well, I would like to add something if I can. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, many people of the North ask why Redalic or something like Redalic exists. So I could say that Redalic began because social sciences and humanities weren't in any database, including Cielo, that began mainly for medical journals. So we have analyzed, and there's no way for the majority of the journals of social sciences and humanities to be indexed in Web of Science or Scopus, that are the main sources of evaluation of journals and evaluation of research. So that's the reason of the existence of a platform like Redalic, of a regional platform that can hold a collection that there's no other way to index in other part of the world or in other database.
Mario.
So I was struck by a theme that ran across most of the presentations we heard. That is the issue of indexing. So the emphasis on visibility and discoverability over access. I mean, you know, in conversations, at least in the US, the emphasis is on, you know, access to material, the cost of producing material that then will be freely accessible. And instead, here we have heard stories about the fact that, you know, actually there has been open access content available for a very long time, even before the open access trend took off majorly in the US and Europe. So I was struck by the the different focus on different problems. So the indexing. So and pardon my naivete, I never thought about this before, before listening to your presentations. So it is kind of bizarre, right, that we have all this emphasis on open access when the central tool for making, open access content discoverable actually is in private hands, right? So why don't we talk about having an open index, to have access to open content? So it's kind of bizarre, this asymmetry, right? And the other asymmetry that I was struck by is the fact that, and so here I'm going back to what Kavita was, discussing this morning about this kind of recurring colonial and neo-colonial, logics. So here, if I were, a stereotypical Western prospector, I would want to index everything that the Global South has ever written so that I can pillage it, right? So the idea of actually not indexing the products of the Global South is kind of bizarre from a colonial point of view, right? So why? Is it because the colonial mentality is like, okay, look, we want to get their gold, their silk, their spices, their art, but we really don't care about their science. Right? So is there like an implicit bias that this stuff is really not valuable, so it's not even worth indexing? Or it's just stupidity? Well, meaning that, somebody is not in touch with capitalistic logic, that, maximizing indexing would be good business.
Well, I think in the afternoon we're going to have a theme talking about predatory journal publishing. And talking about open access indexing, that probably will be one of the problems with this kind of predatory publishing economy. Okay, there has been a chaotic situation in this, that private for-profit business has come up with some kind of paid indexing. Okay, if you have a journal, you want to be indexed, you pay, and it doesn't matter, the quality, or and professional practice or something of the journal. As long as you pay for it, then I'm going to index. So this has created some kind of problem for this uncontrolled business in open access indexing. And recently, I have been working on this research topic to explore some problems with so-called alternative or predatory impact factors, alternative or predatory indexing. And I hope in the afternoon I will have something more to talk on this issue.
And we are at this point very over time, and I know many people are looking forward to lunch. I will, if any of the panelists have a response to Mario's point, we can cover that quickly and then let people go eat. Or any further comments?
Well, I think I share his idea of open indexing. But then, the notion that if I just want to steal what you have, why don't I just make you bring everything on board? But then, I think the colonial thing created another mindset, which is Southern researcher mindset of if I hold what I have, maybe I'll be able to use it for myself. You really don't. Let's put a few things up. You really do not find a lot of sharing in the South, actually. And there's a whole lot of information that need to be indexed. So maybe one of the things open access should be pursuing is really getting things on board. But then, what is the value to such things? will Web of Science index search? Because impact factor, those things come to play, impact factor. Now, if it's on Web of Science, if it's cited there, then you're giving a big number, and then that makes you better than somebody else. And somebody can be 50 years in publishing, and then you are just 7 years in publishing, and you made 5 years, now you're on Web of Science, you're giving a big number, 7 point something, and then somebody has been 20, 50 years in publishing, not somehow is left out of the way. So the autometrics of impact factor is itself defective. How be it, but then we need to find a way through that. There's a whole lot of information that are not yet indexed, and we index them. But how well? Because I see this monetary value somehow, somewhere in the system, the value put on it in the system. If I'm told as a researcher in the South that I must publish in high impact journals, and only 1% of the journals from my end are considered high impact, where do you expect me to put my things?
And I think with that, we're going to wrap up. If we could thank the panel. Thank you all.